Hello, this is Hugh Ross, and I'm the president and founder of Reasons to Believe. I'm an astrophysicist, also serve as a pastor in a church between Caltech and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. But for me, reasons.org/Ross. And in the next few minutes, we're going to be talking about climate change. I've just come out with a book on climate change. And to help us with this, we're going to have a moderated discussion, and it's going to be led by Anastasia Young. She's here with me, and she's going to try to get her discussion going.
I know you just had a book come out, Weather and Climate Change, and so you've done a lot of research on climate change, and I have my own questions. Most of us, the first time we really started hearing about climate change was
climate change, making the point that this has been an ongoing dialogue and discussion, debate amongst scientists for about 100 years. But it became politically charged in the 1980s, especially in the late 1980s. And so this has been around a lot longer than people think, especially in the more developed nations of the world. This has been a major issue.
This has been a conversation for about 100 years. Everything that I've heard, it sounds so imminent and sounds terrifying that, what's happening right now with the climate and all of the scary things that were happening.
Well, I'm glad I waited a bit to bring this book out, because it's only in the last 18 months that the scientific community has really been able to develop a reliable, accurate temperature record of what's been happening over the past 10,000 years. And what that new record reveals is that our climate has been about 4 times more stable than we thought, say, 2 or 3 years ago. So we've been enjoying a period of extreme climate stability. That's one of the main features of the book I wrote, is to alert people to the fact that what we've been experiencing for 9,500 years is an extreme exception. The norm for planet Earth is climate instability. What we've had for 9,500 years is a global mean temperature that's not changed by more than plus or minus 0.65 degrees. Now, to get a little more detail, the temperature hit a peak 8,700 years ago, and it's been steadily declining by about 1 degree centigrade over those 8,700 years. But what has happened in the past 70 years, just 70 years, is that 1 degree temperature decline has been completely reversed. We're now back to where we were 8,700 years ago. And the concern is, if we stay on the current warming trend of the past 70 years, that it could go up another degree centigrade in just another 70 years, and that raises the possibility that we could melt the polar ice cap and quickly find ourselves in the next ice age. Because that's something you see in the ice age cycle. Global warming always brings on global cooling. And for the first time, the scientific community has an understanding why that happens. I make the point in the book that in order for billions of humans to live on the Earth and have high technology civilization, we must be living in an ice age cycle, where the planet cycles between 10% ice coverage and 20 to 23% ice coverage. But if you look at the past 2 million years of the ice age cycle, it's been characterized by extreme climate instability, where the global mean temperature jumps up and down by 15 degrees centigrade over just a few centuries, which explains why humans living during the past ice age were not able to launch global civilization. The climate simply was too unstable to permit them to scale up agricultural activity, where they could actually set free a significant percentage of the human population to do music, art, technology, engineering, and science. Everybody was employed just trying to come up with enough food. But climate stability changed all that. What's unique is that we've had 9,500 years of extreme climate stability, where the global mean temperature has been optimal for the development of human civilization. This is unique to the Earth's history. And so we need to realize that this period of climate stability is the exception, it's not the norm. And especially if you want to have billions of humans on the face of the Earth, you have to be living an ice age cycle. The ice age cycle basically makes sure you've got enough water and enough fertilizer to feed billions of people. And what's special is we're living in an ice age cycle that normally drives extreme climate instability, but for a number of reasons, many different reasons, we've had this brief episode of extreme climate stability. And I would agree that we're in danger of upsetting that stability, but most of my book is devoted to the fact there are things we can do to sustain the climate stability for a little more than a millennium, if we so choose, and in a way that we can enhance the world economy rather than cripple the world economy. I mean, one of my motivations was to take the politics out of the debate, because you got one side saying we have to stabilize the climate, and to do that, we need to make draconian economic sacrifices. I'm saying, based on biblical principles, there's a way we can stabilize the climate where we boost the world economy rather than cripple it. And in that sense, I think we can take the politics out of the debate. Who's going to vote against a win-win? Economic pathways that enhance the global mean economy while at the same time stabilizing the climate. I mean, I got 2 whole chapters on proposals and how we can make that happen to the benefit of everybody. And it's based on the biblical principle that God has commanded us human beings to manage the resources of planet Earth for our benefit and the benefit of the rest of Earth's life, which implies that we will not be forced to make a choice between our benefit and the benefit of the rest of the planet's life. We will find win-win solutions if we're willing to search diligently enough for them.
It's really made us look at the planet as we are, as a people, you know, not their country, my country. We're a people, we all impact each other. That's a good thing, I think, as a Christian, you know, to have that perspective and understanding that all of us are created in God's image. So how much cooperation across the globe are some of your plans or proposals going to require?
Well, I'm glad you raised that issue, Sia, because cooperation has been the biggest barrier to trying to stabilize climate change, along the lines of what you see in Al Gore's books and other scientific writings, because they're really demanding that people make significant sacrifices. Let's all cooperate and all sacrifice together. It's much easier to motivate people. And again, this is a biblical principle. We human beings are fundamentally selfish. We look out for our own interests and not the interests of others, in spite of biblical commands to do the reverse. And so it's easier to motivate people if they got an economic incentive. I mean, one example I put in the book is that, you know, we have a problem with people in the Amazonian jungles burning down the forest and trying to convert it into pasture lands, thinking, well, I can raise cattle there and make money. Not realizing that if they sustain that, the soil in the Amazon is not able to maintain that long term. We're in danger of turning the Amazon region into a desert because the soil is really quite poor. Rather, we need to go to those people and say, here's a way you can make more money. Instead of trying to, you know, slash and burn and convert it to pasture land and raise cattle, why don't we actually try to make money on responsible lumbering? And what we now know, for example, is that the old strategy, we have to preserve the Amazon at all costs and that let nobody tamper with it, is actually a bad strategy, because the old trees tend to die. And when they die, they release carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. And old trees don't grow fast, so they're not very efficient at pulling greenhouse gases of the atmosphere. We'd be better off at going through the Amazon jungle and lumbering the trees before they get to the point of disease and decay and sell that lumber. And that way it would be preserved in people's homes and furniture. And then replant the area so that you got fast growing trees. And if you got fast growing trees, that's going to pull greenhouse gases of the atmosphere And each different tree species has a period within its growth cycle where it's most efficient in pulling greenhouse gases of the atmosphere. And so you need to manage the forest and all of its species in such a way that you maximize the drawdown of greenhouse gases. And what's interesting, if you do that, you make the most money out of your lumbering industries. So there's actually a way to make the Amazonian people more prosperous economically, while at the same time, you're actually making the Amazon a region that's even more efficient at pulling greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere. So that's just one example out of many of things we can do that really are a win-win solution.
Kind of advice about not cutting down all the trees, but
cut them down the right way.
Cut them down the right way
that you make money, and cut them down in a way where you actually stabilize the climate. Again,
okay.
Win-win. And
Okay.
also be a win-win for the life that lives in the Amazon. So, if you selectively lumber the trees, cutting down the older trees of different species and replanting them with trees that grow faster, the life that lives in the Amazon would benefit. We'd still have all the medicines that we can pull out of the Amazon. The Amazon is the most biologically diverse place on the planet. It's to our economic benefit to sustain that diversity. But also, I think we can appeal to the people living in the Amazon. This is a way that will enhance your economic well-being. A lot of what you're going to see in weathering climate change is looking at the history of the Earth and just seeing how step by step we have our Creator intervening and fine-tuning and designing to open up this incredible period of extreme climate stability. So this has been a long process in the history of the Earth. And I think I did that to really make the point we need to see this as a special gift from God. Look at all that He's done to make this possible. And look at the timing. I mean, we have this period of extreme climate stability at the same time when the sun has got minimal flaring activity. At the same time, our galaxy has an unusually very infrequent period of supernova eruptions. All these little windows are lining up. I mean, what amazes me is when you actually look at all the evidence, and I think that's the benefit of having an interdisciplinary approach here. When you do an interdisciplinary approach, you say, wow, there's not just this window of extreme climate stability, there's about 30 windows of things that are exceptional. And they all could happen at different times, but the amazing thing is they all happen simultaneously. And so when you see all these narrow time windows that are necessary for us humans to have global human civilization with a large population, you realize this is no accident. To have all these narrow time windows coincidentally line up at the same time tells us there's purpose in all of this. And really what I'm trying to do is make people ask the question, why? Why has our Creator set everything up like this? What does God want from us in response? What is the reason why we humans exist on this planet with billions of us at this time? What is our role in all of this? And people commented on this politically, but I want them to look at it from a much bigger perspective. Preparing for the fact that this period of extreme climate stability inevitably will come to an end. We can extend it, but not extend it forever. Likewise, we need to be preparing for other things that we see in the other time windows. For example, we've had this period of 100 years with no big solar flare. But we know from the event in 1859, these things happen. And there's relatively economic ways to prepare for those. But if we don't prepare, then we're going to suffer the consequences. Again, there's the biblical principle, build your house on a rock, not on the sand. But we see multiple ways where we here in the 21st century have our houses on sand. And in one sense, there's a wake-up call, not just a wake-up call to, hey, the temperature's going up. There's a wake-up call to all kinds of things. And that's one reason why I talked about these multiple time windows, is to make the point there's more going on than just the climate change that could be threatening us. And that we need to take an integrated look at how we can extend this period of billions of us existing and thriving at the rate we do, and ultimately fulfilling the purpose for why God put us here. As a Christian, I say, where did we go astray from what the Bible taught us? I mean, this coronavirus, I think, is a perfect example. Quarantining was taught in the Bible at the time of Moses. And so, we've been a little more circumspect about that, and we could have had less consequences. In fact, what fascinated me is it combines quarantining with washing. And it's like, okay, now we know that's what we should be doing. Also talks about how we need to quickly bury our feces. And so I'm saying, hey, we need to be closing our toilet lids. The Bible actually talks about all this stuff. And so if we just, and likewise, to realize what we're experiencing right now is a gift. God put us here as stewards. We're to go to Him when we need wisdom about how we can manage this planet. And so, yeah, we're caught in a spot where we say, wow, we goofed. Let's go back to God's word and see what we did and get ready. Because, viruses are here. They are part of God's very good creation. We wouldn't be here without viruses. So they're a blessing, but we humans can also make them a curse. And I think that's significant too, is that just like with this climate instability we're facing, is it God's fault? No, it's our fault. This pandemic, as bad as it is it God's fault? No, we actually made it worse by our mismanagement. So it's things we can do to correct, but also to prepare for the future and realize, okay, this is a special time and we need to be wise. God's given us the counsel. He's told us we can manage the planet for our benefit, the benefit of all life, but we're going to need His wisdom. And hopefully this will cause people to go back to Him and say, okay, we need to find your solution rather than claiming there is no solution, or the only solution is something that's going to require draconian sacrifices. No, that's not in line with what God's word has taught for thousands of years. Well, don't panic. Okay, God's in control. Climate change is real. I give the evidence for why it's real in the book, but make the point that there's no need to panic. There's things that we can do. Now, we need to do them right away. I mean, delay is not an option. And God has promised that there are solutions to the environmental situations we're facing that will be to our benefit and the benefit of all life. And if we don't have the answers, we need to dig for those answers. And I don't claim to have all the answers in my book. I just give some answers I'm aware of. I think there are many more answers. And it's like, let's at least start pursuing the win-win solutions rather than, okay, I'm caught between a rock and a hard place, and I'm going to choose the rock or I'm going to choose the hard place. God loves us more than that. There's been quite a big debate in the scientific literature. Which of these 14 possible causes for the transition, are the real cause? And I argue in my book, you cannot finger a single one of the 14 as the one and only cause of the transition. In fact, it's quite possible you need all 14 in order to explain the transition. But a big feature in all of this is that these causal agents, including asteroid strikes, and it looks like there might be two that hit, or two comet strikes, what they did is brought down the carbon dioxide level in the atmosphere, and that this had a major effect in transitioning us from 41,000 years to 100,000 years. But yeah, I give a brief list in the book, but if you want all the technical details, it's in the appendix of all the different things that are responsible for changing that. A lot of it having to do with things that are going on right here in North America. The retreat of the ice sheets, for example, changed about 800,000 years ago. About 40 years ago, the nations of the world said we're going to have to stop using certain freons because they're making the Antarctic hole bigger. Well, the Antarctic hole has gotten a lot smaller, but in the last 2 years, the Arctic hole has gotten bigger. But most scientists feel that's a temporary phenomenon. And also there's a move, and I mentioned this in the book, that we ruled against the use of CFCs for refrigerants some 30 years ago. There's now a move to eliminate the use of HFC refrigerants because they're about 50% as damaging on the ozone hole as the CFCs. And I think that ban is going to go into effect for virtually all the nations of the world this year in 2020. And so hopefully that will continue the shrinking of the Antarctic ozone hole and likewise the Arctic ozone hole. But yeah, certain climate factors are believed to be responsible for why we had this temporary opening of the Arctic ozone hole. But yeah, keep in mind the Antarctic hole has gotten a lot smaller. It's reduced in size because we've stopped using these refrigerant chemicals. I mean, they go up into the atmosphere, and incidentally, they're extremely efficient greenhouse gases. Now, we don't put that many into the atmosphere, but they're literally thousands of times more efficient in trapping heat from the sun than, say, carbon dioxide is. And so it's not only helping to shrink the ozone holes, it's also having a major effect on preventing the rise of the surface temperature of the Earth. But as I mentioned in the book, they're now going to take care of HFCs as well. But I think what we now know is that the good news is there are refrigerants that we can use that are neither CFCs or HFCs that are efficient. So this isn't necessarily a lose-lose. And I think that's important because there are underground factories. We know they exist in India, they probably exist in China, that are still producing black market CFCs. So we can provide them with an economic incentive, then we won't have to worry about this black market industry going on.
Now we're back to we need to work together as
Look
cooperate.
for a win-win. That's how you eliminate people that are doing things in the black market economy. We see the planet plummet very quickly into an ice age. And I got a chapter in the book explaining why that happens, that when you raise the global mean temperature, one of the effects is you melt the polar ice cap. And when you've got ice over the Arctic Ocean, it reflects sunlight with about 60% efficiency. But when you melt that ice and you've got open Arctic Ocean liquid water, it reflects sunlight with only 6% efficiency, which means the Arctic Ocean, free of ice, absorbs a lot of heat from the sun. And when it absorbs a lot of heat from the sun, it makes a lot of water vapor. And that water vapor falls on Siberia and Canada as snow. One reason we don't have an ice age right now is that Siberia and Canada are deserts. They only get about 10 inches of precipitation per year. And so, yes, snow falls there in the winter, but it's sufficiently low that it melts in the summer and you don't get an accumulation of ice. But if you melt the polar ice cap, it wouldn't surprise me that instead of 10 inches of precipitation on northern Canada and Siberia, you get 20 inches. And if you get 20 inches, you're going to get snow accumulating and transforming into ice quite rapidly. And within centuries, you could have 1,000 feet of ice covering all of Canada and Siberia. And of course, that reflects sunlight with 60% efficiency, which has an impact on cooling the entire planet and keeping the planet in an ice age for another 90,000 years, where the global mean temperature is jumping up and down by 15 degrees centigrade. So that's not a good thing for human global civilization. We would be wise to prevent that from happening. And I think the good news is in the last couple of years, we've seen no growth in the melting away of the summer ice cap, of the Arctic summer ice cap. So if we can sustain that, that would be a good thing to do. But that explains why you get rapid global cooling after a period of significant global warming. What we did notice in the last ice age cycle is that when the ice begins to accumulate, you're only looking at about 1,000 or 2,000 years before you got thousands of feet of ice covering all of Canada and most of Siberia. And keep this in mind. We're living here in Southern California. The last ice age, the ice came all the way down into Southern California. So it's not just Canada is going to be impacted. Large chunks of the United States will be impacted as well.
Wow. Wow. I can't even
That's
picture
where
that.
Yosemite Valley came from, right?
Oh, okay. Haven't we already done most of the damage we'll ever do?
Well, It is true that if we continue on the path that we're going, just basically ignore what's happening and continue living the way we're living, we're going to see the temperature go up by another degree centigrade within the next 70 years, because we saw what happened in the past 70 years. And if that happens, we're going to be close to melting the polar ice cap and bringing on global cooling. I think it will certainly happen if we raise the global mean temperature by 2.5 degrees centigrade. Uh, so yeah, if we just do, keep going like we're going and don't make any changes, those are the consequences we'll face. However, if we look at this and say, wow, in just 70 years, we've erased 8,700 years of global cooling, we need to pay attention to this. And let's look for solutions where we can stop this rise of global mean temperature while at the same time boosting the world economy. I mean, one thing I suggest in the book, for example, is we really need to pursue thorium nuclear reactors. We've been trying to make energy with uranium reactors, but thorium reactors are much safer and they're much more economic. And we actually had them back in 1969 on a very small scale. And, as part of the physics community, I've been aware that we focused 70 years of research and billions of dollars on trying to find some way to come up with fusion energy, the kind of energy you see coming out of the sun. And if we could pull that off, it would produce for us all the energy we want. But there are huge technological hurdles to overcome. I believe those hurdles are minuscule when you look at thorium. They're there, but I think they can be overcome for a lot less money. And, there's so much thorium in the crust of the Earth. Our planet Earth has 630 times as much thorium as what we'd expect in any other rocky planet. So we've been blessed with all this thorium. And one question that comes to me is, if we had this incredible immensity of thorium in the crust of the Earth, maybe it's there for a reason. And, the United States, for example, has got enough thorium that it could produce all the energy we need, 100% of the energy we need at the level we're using it today for several thousand years. And there's a potential we could produce it for a fraction of the cost of what we're paying now for energy. So that, again, is another example that we could significantly reduce the use of these fossil fuels, significantly reduce the amount of greenhouse gases we're putting in the atmosphere, and actually everybody having a cheaper form of energy than we have right now. So again, a win-win solution.
Some quote unquote experts say global warming is man-made, and other experts say it's from natural causes. How do intelligent but non-expert folks discern the truth? And this was one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, that you have well-meaning people on both sides of the argument, and I truly believe that people aren't just making things up. Each side has their evidence per se, and how are we to sort this through? How are we supposed to discern and find information?
Yeah, this was controversial, say, a decade ago. And I think what's helpful now is we've got much better and more reliable data than we had a decade ago. And basically, what I talk about in the book is how starting 8,700 years ago, the natural cycles began to cool the planet. So, for example, the tilt of the Earth's rotation axis began to change from 24.5 degrees and is now moving down to 22.1. We're at 23.5 right now. So we're in a cooling phase in terms of the tilt of rotation axis. We're also in the cooling phase in terms of the shape of the Earth's orbit about the sun. So the natural cycles are cooling the planet. But what happened 8,700 years ago, with the launch of human civilization, the Neolithic Revolution, human activity began to warm the planet. We domesticated cows, for example. We began to grow rice. And there's a number of other things we did that began to gradually warm the planet. And amazingly, for 8,700 years, human activity was warming the planet at exactly the rate the natural cycles were cooling it. And so they counterbalance one another. Here we had these natural cycles that normally would have rapidly cooled the planet, but you had human activity and civilization growth that began to warm the planet, and the two were in balance, in such great balance that for 8,700 years, the global mean temperature very steadily and linearly declined by only 1 degree centigrade. Now human activity is marching at such a huge pace that we've warmed the planet by 1 degree in just 70 years. So there's two factors going on. There's the natural cycles cooling the planet, human activity is warming it, and there are ways that we can do to sustain that perfect balance that we've seen up until the year 1950.
So it sounds like you're saying it's both and that it is natural and man-made.
Well, it's more complicated than that because some of the human activity cools the planet. Other human activities warm it. Likewise with the natural cycles. Some of them work to cool the planet, some of them work to warm the planet. What I talk about in the book is let's average out all the natural phenomena, and if we average it all out, it's been consistently cooling the planet, very consistently and linearly cooling the planet. And likewise, if you average out all the human activities, they've been consistently and linearly warming the planet. And they've been in terrific balance with one another, except for the past 70 years. We need to be paying attention to the refrigerants we're putting in the atmosphere. And so what you see in the book is we actually look at all the greenhouse gases in an integrated way, because you could make the mistake of unintended consequences, where you reduce the carbon dioxide going in the atmosphere, but you wind up enhancing the methane and the nitrous oxides going into the atmosphere. In particular, I talk about how there's new ways that we could raise rice, but you got to be careful because rice not only pumps carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it also pumps methane and nitrous oxides. So we need to look at all the greenhouse gases and make sure that what we're doing doesn't turn out to be counterproductive. There's a whole chapter on unintended consequences. And it's always good in any complex issue like this that when you look at solutions, say, what are the potential consequences? And am I going to get myself into more trouble than I bargained for? Physics don't change over the history of the universe. And we do have tornadoes and earthquakes and hurricanes and wildfires because of the fact we live in a universe with gravity and thermodynamics, electromagnetism, and a strong and weak nuclear force. And I've written about this fairly extensively in a previous book, More Than a Theory, making the point that we need earthquakes and tornadoes and hurricanes. They actually serve very good purposes. And and we also note that they're optimized. We don't have too many earthquakes. We don't have too few earthquakes. They're at the optimal level. And everything we refer to as a natural disaster, we see that they are optimized. On the other hand, we have Jesus saying to us in the Gospels, don't build your house on the sand. Knowing that you live in a place where there are hurricanes coming in from the Atlantic, it's probably not a good idea to move to the east coast of Florida. And what do? We send our elderly citizens to retire there. And they're the ones that are most at risk. So that's an example where, we need to be a little bit wise about the fact that these things happen and to properly prepare for you. So simply being wise about this, but appreciate these things have been optimized. And I think that's a point I'm trying to make in the book. We see extreme optimization in the context of this last 9,500 years. And that should just blow us away, saying, wow, I can't believe that God did all this just for us. Place. So it's our choice whether we bring on the next ice age in 100 years or bring it on in 1,500 years. I'm all for pushing it back 1,500 years. And that will give us plenty of time as a human species to fulfill the purpose for why God put us here on planet Earth. But the idea that we can sustain this forever, incidentally, I have a chapter in the book saying this is not the only thing that's going to doom us. There's all kinds of things that tell us our time here
within the universe is temporary. After all, the universe is expanding. If you let it continue expanding at an accelerating rate, there reaches a point where you get the big rip, where protons are no longer stable. And if protons get ripped apart, human existence is impossible. That's not going to happen for many hundreds of billions of years. But for example, the sun's getting brighter. Eventually, the sun will get so bright it's not going to be possible for us to sustain photosynthesis on the face of the earth. That's going to cripple our food supply. That's going to happen in just a few million years. But then I back it all the way up to things that are going to happen in only thousands of years, in only hundreds of years. Just making the point that God intended all along that our time here on planet Earth would be temporary. It would be brief. But the good news in all of that is we only have to be exposed to the decay of this universe for a brief period of time. God has promised that when we fulfill the purpose for which He put us here on planet Earth, He's going to take us to a brand new realm where there's no decay, no death, no suffering, no evil, completely different physics. But that won't happen until we first fulfill the purpose for which He created us. And He's given us all the resources and all the time that we need to do that. I mean, consider it's thermodynamics that ensures that the more sin you commit, the more pain you're going to experience, the more time you're going to waste, and the harder you're going to have to work. And if you're like me, Sia, you don't enjoy gratuitous work, gratuitous pain, or wasted time. And so, as I share with my sons when I was raising them, if I don't discipline you, the laws of physics will.
Mm.
And so the laws of physics and the space-time dimensions are designed to point us away from our selfishness, our tendency towards sin and evil, towards a virtuous life, and to discovering we can't do it without the help of the Creator. But if we go to the Creator, He has promised, if you come to me, I'll give you what you can't do for yourself. And so this is the whole message of the Christian faith, what separates Christianity from all the other religions of the world. And yes, He designed this earth in such a way that that message could be efficiently taken to billions of human beings, not in millions of years, but in just hundreds of years. And so the fact that we've only got a maximum of 1,500 years left, that's more than enough time to bring about this goal that God has to use the universe, the earth, and humanity in such a way that billions of us can come into a relationship with Him where we can be permanently delivered from the consequences of evil and suffering. And it's all done through the hands of the Creator of the universe. The Creator of the universe came here 2,000 years ago and made a trade. He sacrificed Himself on the cross, paid for the offense that all of us have committed against God and against one another, and said, I'm willing to trade my moral perfection for your moral imperfection and have my Holy Spirit come into you in such a way that you can be step by step delivered from this tendency towards sin and evil and on a path of virtue to where you become morally perfect. That will happen. And that's the message of Christianity. And what is amazing to me, God gave us all the resources financially, technologically, in terms of the population we need to get that job done relatively quickly. In fact, what amazes me is I think we could pull this off in decades. It doesn't necessarily take hundreds of years.
Thank
Go to our website, and for a gift of any amount, we will send you a copy, a gift of any amount to Reasons to Believe. And you can do that by going to give.reasons.org. We will send you a copy of Weathering Climate Change.